So the other day, Mike Pence was in Iowa at a campaign event, and he was confronted by a woman in the crowd regarding January 6th. So check it out.
If it wasn't for your vote, we would not have Joe Biden in the White House.
Right.
Joe Biden shouldn't be there. And all those wonderful things that you and Trump were doing together would be continuing, and this country would be on the right path.
So just real quick, before we jump into the main question that she has that's kind of confronting him, just the way that she asked that question, the words that she used was really powerful. I mean, when she said, we wouldn't have Joe Biden in the White House if it wasn't for you. Everything was going great. You were winning. We were succeeding. You were the vice president, headed towards, victory, bringing prosperity to the nation. And Mike Pence, you altered the course of history by not doing what you should have done. I just thought that was worth mentioning.
Do you ever second guess yourself? That was a constitutional right that you had to send those votes back to the states. It was not like you were going to personally elect him. We all know by the number of votes that were there who won that election.
Well,
You changed history for this country.
Yeah, let me speak to the issue, because I think it's an issue that continues to be misunderstood. But I know by God's grace I did exactly what the Constitution of the United States required of me that day. I kept my oath. Let me be very respectful of the question and tell you, look, states conduct our elections. You never want to let Washington, D.C. run elections. You certainly would never want one person in Washington, D.C. to decide who the President of the United States is.
You weren't deciding. You were just sending it back to the states.
Ma'am, let me explain it to you. At the end of the day, when Iowa certified your results and sent them to Washington, D.C., when Indiana certified our results, the Constitution of the United States, in Article 2, says the job of the Vice President is to serve as the presiding officer of a joint session where you open and count the votes. Don't take my word for it. Go read the Constitution. And I want to tell you, with all due respect, I said what I announced, President Trump was wrong about my authority that day, and he's still wrong.
That's a narrative you hear very often. As vice president, I can't elect the next president. Nobody's asking him to elect the next president. Nobody wanted him to elect the next president. They just wanted him to send the invalid votes, the invalid electoral votes, back to the states so that the states can decide what to do with them. And whatever the states decided would be what would happen. There has to be a check and a balance. The Supreme Court, that's a check. So anything that is done in our political system, if it's unconstitutional, it will be thrown out. So if that's not possible, the Supreme Court would step in and say, I'm sorry, the vice president doesn't have that power. Mike Pence mentions reading the Constitution. So let's look at the Constitution. Let's see what it says. But remember, the Constitution is not a 1,000-page document. So it is vague. It does leave things up to interpretation. But let's read what it says. So it says here, the states shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate, which would be the Vice President. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. So let me read that last part again. The votes shall then be counted. The way I interpret that is when it says votes, it means legitimate votes. It means legitimate votes. It doesn't mean fraudulent votes. Now, Donald Trump made a very good point on this particular topic when he was asked at the town hall event. Here's what Donald Trump had to say about it.
Mr. President, do you feel that you owe him an apology?
No, because he did something wrong. He should have put the votes back to the state legislatures, and I think we would have had a different outcome. I really do.
But he doesn't have the authority to do that, as you know.
What?
The vice president does not have the authority to reject those
Are you ready? Let's
election
have this one out
results.
just now, because it's interesting. Let's keep it interesting, right? I like Mike Pence very much. He's a very fine man. He's a very nice man. He made a mistake. His lawyer said, you cannot move. I called him the human conveyor belt. I said, even if the votes, I talked to his lawyer, even if the votes are absolutely fraudulent, he can't say, yes, sir, he can't send back. And the Democrats played it, and the rhinos played it. And then the election was over. They told him he couldn't do it. And Mike said to me, I can't do it. The lawyers told me I can't do it. They can't do it. But the lawyers were wrong, because right after the election, they all met, the rhinos and the Democrats, and they worked out a plan to make sure that future vice presidents don't do what I said you could do.
That's not what happened. You're referring to the Electoral Count Act.
That's
I've
exactly
read that. There is no authority.
No,
legal
excuse
experts,
me.
including Republican legal experts, say that he does not have that authority, Mr.
Caitlin,
President. But I want to
why
move
did
on.
they change the law then, saying that you can't do it?
They didn't change the law. They strengthened the law because they were worried about
Oh, they
presidents
strengthened it,
exploiting.
meaning you could do it. Thank you.
That's not what it means.
Thank you.
So when you listen to this interview, which was more of a debate, the most powerful question that Trump asked was, why did they change the law so that you can't do it going forward? And her response is, they didn't change it, they strengthened it. Well, that's the same thing. And Donald Trump correctly points that out. That's a huge point. I mean, that's like, kind of makes the case right there. If it wasn't possible, then why did they go back and change it? It's because it was possible. Something very interesting, the Young Turks, which I don't agree with on just about any topic, actually did a segment on Mike Pence on January 6th where they admitted that Mike Pence had the authority to send those votes back to the states, and if he had done that, they would have successfully voided out the false ballots and Donald Trump would have been reelected. Check it out.
I have a question about that, though. So let's say Pence really had no spine at all, and when it mattered most, he ceded to Donald Trump's demands. I mean,
that had a real chance of working.
Really?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why.
So my point is, and I'm sorry for dragging this out, but I am genuinely curious. So if Pence had done something unconstitutional and went along with what Trump wanted, and if you had all these fraudulent electors essentially giving this victory to Donald Trump, wouldn't the Democrats sue? Wouldn't they take this to the Supreme Court? And wouldn't? And look, I get that the Supreme Court is right wing. But as we have shared with you in various rulings as of late, they actually sided with an employee versus the actual corporations in a recent case.
No, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Here, there's a mechanism with which they could have used to steal this election. They could have said, hey, listen, the state legislatures say one thing, you Democrats say another. It's a political question, and we're invoking the political question doctrine. So that you guys deal with it politically, it's not for us to decide. Elections are your business, not our business, okay?
Good point.
And if they do that, then the Republican legislatures go, sorry, the fake electors are real. Ha 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 ha. And even if you have a controversy, it goes to the House. But the House picks the president, but it does it state by state. And Republicans, even then, even though they had less members of the House, they had more states. So they would have won. So that plan was not a terrible plan. That's why
it was
Peter
actually low-key genius.
Yes.
Now, of course, this is a liberal, left-leaning show, so of course they're going to try to frame it in a bad light, saying that Pence would have been burning the Constitution. But the truth is, this election coming up in 2024, it may be the last real election we ever have. Like this is a serious topic. This is our voice as a country. If we don't have the ability to vote and we don't trust our elections, that's going to be the end of this country and the end of everything that we hold dear. So I just pray that that doesn't ever happen. And we really, really, really need to win this election so that we can set the country on the right path.